name's Neil. With a few different hats, I'm the current Debian project leader. So in charge of trying to make a few thousand people all pull together to produce what's probably one of the largest free software projects in the world, which is quite a lot like herding cats, which is kind of my other job as an engineering manager for Collabora, who, again, we do free software consultancy and try and bring free software to people. In the past, I have been on the board of Software in the Public Interest, so the umbrella organization behind quite a few large, successful free software projects, and the Open Rights Group, a organization kind of like the EFF in the UK, trying to promote digital rights and how we can try and push these, and generally dealing with lots of different free software. But the most important bit here is I am not a lawyer. Is anyone in this room actually a lawyer? Excellent, I can say anything I want then, and you'll all believe me, and there's no one to contradict me, and it'll all be fine. I was a little bit worried that I'd see a couple of the lawyers I know who are in here then to say what I'm talking about is absolutely rubbish, but they're not here, so you can all believe me. Trademarks. Let's talk about those. So the interesting thing about trademarks is that they are originally a consumer protection device. So the entire point of trademarks is to, if you go and get something or buy something, then you have a trust on where it came from, and you can determine the quality of where it is, and you can believe in that. They're not there for brand protection, and they're not there to protect your own use of any particular mark. It's there to, the aim of it is trying to protect the consumer and what they're getting. And unlike copyright, for example, it can be easily lost. There's a concept known as abandonment. So if you don't use your trademarks, believe in the US it's after 3 years, then you lose them, and then anyone can use them. There's also another interesting one called naked licensing, which is an interesting phrase, but basically means that if you let other people use your trademarks and you don't enforce it, then again, you lose them. That can be classed as abandonment, so you have to actually go and enforce use of your trademarks. And then we'll have something that goes on to something called groundless threats laws. So if you imagine, so in case of Debian, we have a trademark. We have a couple on both the swirl, the logo, and the text Debian. And we want to make sure that people are able to use Debian and people know what they're getting so they can download it. So certainly in terms of abandonment, we use it quite a lot. It's obvious we use it, well, hopefully Debian releases more than once every 3 years, but yeah, that's been interesting in the past, but we actively use that, so that's fine. Now we have the issue of what happens if people use the word Debian in an interesting way. Well, we have to try and tell them that using it like this isn't okay. This is good, this is bad. But then we have this problem called groundless threats law. Now this is certainly an issue in the UK and a couple of other jurisdictions. It varies from where you are. But essentially there's a, similar in the US is an anti-slap law. So if you threaten to sue someone and you're not going to sue it, then you can get sued yourself for making that very threat. So when I'm trying to talk to someone saying, hey guys, please don't use this trademark like this, it's against our policy, we hold the trademark, there's a risk there, because they could say, you're threatening me, you can't do that, that's illegal. So you end up with this weird, perverse area that legally the safest thing to do if you find someone using any of your trademarks, so if someone goes and puts the Debian logo on a website in a way that might be a bit dodgy, the best legally safest thing to do is to file a lawsuit about them and then talk to them afterwards about what they're doing. Now, that's not great, and that really doesn't help endear people to what you're doing. So some people may come in. So some people may say, well, why not bother at all? Why just say, trademarks, who needs them? Let's just not bother. Well, there were certainly similar arguments made about copyright, and why bother with that? And I think we can hopefully, most of us agree that without actually fairly decent copyright law, we wouldn't have copyleft, and we wouldn't have the spread of free software we have. And there are some things that we need to try and protect against. So I'll run through a couple of the sort of problems people have come out with using trademarks or not using trademarks, as the case may be. So it's all about, we want good people to be able to use our trademarks, but we want to prevent bad people from using our trademarks. And unfortunately, there isn't really very good distinctions of what is good and what is bad, which on a slight tangent is why I think it was the do no evil clause in a particular license was troublesome, because what was evil and what is good? And in fact, the author of that particular work, when questioned by IBM, had to give them a special license which says, I authorize IBM to do evil with my work if they particularly want to. So can be quite tricky there. Yeah. So the whole thing about making sure we can do this and avoiding abandonment, it's what you need to do is you need to authorize other parties to use that mark, that trademark. And if you don't exercise adequate control over the use of the mark, and so that can include inadequate control of the quality of things that have been offered under that mark, then you lose it. So it's all about sort of quality and how you can do that. So as a first example, here is a website. Some may well say that that may be trademark infringement. It looks very, very much like the Debian project is offering hosting, except we can probably spell a little bit better. I'd certainly hope so anyway. So what do I do with this site? What do I do with this site? I mean, I could ignore it, but then there's a chance we lose the Debian trademark, which could create problems. I could write to them and say, hey guys, can you change your entire business name? Also the Debian word is also in the URL. I've slightly blurred it so not to embarrass them too much, but I'm sure you could probably find it using search engine of your choice. And I can't just write to them and say, hey guys, change this, we have the mark, there's going to be a problem here, because then we could get sued for threatening them, even though it may or not be groundless. So what I'd like to do, ideally, is write to them and say, hey guys, you're obviously huge fans of Debian, you're doing your entire business around hosting Debian servers, and thank you very much for this. There's a bit of an issue, which is this kind of looks like it's come from the project, so how can we work out how to do this? That's still quite tricky at the moment. But, okay, so there's someone offering hosting, it's Debian. It's not great, but does anyone really mind? Well, yeah, yes and no. But there can be worse implications in some of these things. Firefox 3.5. Excellent. Does anyone remember this website? Because it looks like it's from the Mozilla Foundation. Yep. It looks very much like it's from the Mozilla Foundation. This is entirely in compliance with their license. They're offering the source, it's all fine. What you install is this. With this lovely thing called Hotbar. This was a bit of spyware who installed this particular site, and victims of this scam installed the hotbar toolbar by Pinball Corp, which was previously called Zango. So I don't know if anyone remembers the wonderful history of those people. But that just came from a site which, essentially, that's all compliant with the GPL, or MPL as it happened, but the license, so that's all fine. So you can see how actual real harm can happen by essentially saying, well, we don't need trademarks, just let anyone do what they want. Because you can end up with something that's happening, that's hurting consumers, that's going against what the original purpose of the project was by ignoring it. So it's not something we can just easily ignore. So onto a slight tangent here of how trademark law can be changed or used slightly. Hi, Canonical. For anyone who's been following the press recently, Canonical came up with a trademark policy which was controversial, shall we say. So, Canonical claim copyright on all the binaries they produce from the source. So, if you want to make a distribution based on Ubuntu, there's various restrictions. Either you get a license from them for an amount, who knows, could be free, or it may not be. Or you have to rebuild the entire archive and everything and remove any mention of the word Ubuntu. Now, the word Ubuntu also appears in their package versions and in their changelog, so it's not clear where this can go. But I should point out this is an overreach of trademarks. I generally don't think that this is a thing which they're doing to try and screw anyone over or try to extract a load of money. This is essentially the problems with trademark law and how it exists at the moment. So this isn't the Fine Brothers and their React videos things that say, no, you can't do anything like that. And it's not a new thing. So we've known this for years. If you create a fork of, might have broken something, if you create a fork of some software, so if you want to, say if you want to fork Emacs, you can't take that, make changes, and then still call it Emacs, because that just wouldn't work for anyone. So this isn't a new thing. This requirement remains is fine. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing as well, that they're able to do this. About enforcing quality is really important. So then that brings up the question of what is a trademark? So what is Debian, for example? Official Debian is Debian that is being built through the main repository only, contains Debian-free software guidelines compliant software only, and is kind of built with that. Then there's also another term, which is based on Debian. Ubuntu is based on Debian. It's a factual statement. You can use factual statements to describe things. That's fine by trademark law. But then there's something in between. Ooh, it's got bright. Excellent. So there's something like powered by Debian technologies. Could be one. It's not trademarked. You can use that. It's fine.
Is it? Is that fine?
Well, is it? So that's the question. Is that fine? So this is kind of interesting. So just put your hand up. If you think, so you have Debian. So you get a copy of Debian from debian.org. It's an ISO. You put it on a hosted instance in a cloud provider. It's only using the main technology. Is that Debian? Well, yeah. So you've got it. So slightly moving on there. What if a cloud provider gets Debian, uses the ISO, creates a disk image, and then says, you can install Debian now on our clouds or using a VM, so it's just a hosting provider. Is that Debian? But what if they make some changes to etc to make the network work or something like that? I mean, that's still Debian, right? But what if they have a kernel patch for virtual disk support? Is this now still Debian? It's all still binary compatible. You can still install everything from the repositories. Everything kind of all still works. But how far can you go for it not to still be Debian? What about if you're using a herd kernel, which may or may not work in the cloud? I'm not making any judgments about herd here, but it's also a new architecture, so it's not binary compatible anymore. You're going to shove in some non-free firmware to get your network card working. At what point does something become not Debian? And that, at the moment, is entirely unclear. So we want to make it easy. There's been various methods of trying to do this quite well. Various projects have trademark policies. Let me tell you, no one reads them. You can say, yes, you can do this. You can put the Debian swirl on T-shirts and sell it. That's fine. You can put it on your website and link back to us because you like us. That's fine. No one reads trademark policies. And the way current trademark law exists at the moment is it requires explicit grants. So you need someone to go and do that judgment call of, is this good? Is this bad? How does it work? And as I'm sure people are aware of free software projects and how they work, that everyone has loads of time and are just sitting around twiddling their thumbs waiting to do things. Or they're massively overworked and no one has time to actually go dragging through trademark license requests from random people. And so that doesn't work either. So the interesting one here is what Debian as a project wants to do is it wants people to use the Debian trademark. There's a number of large organizations out there, clouds and in mainframes and things, who are essentially just running Debian, but because there's this uncertainty, because they've had to put a kernel patch in, or because they've had to add something so it actually works, there's uncertainty of if they can call it Debian or not. And then how do you protect against people bundling spyware with Firefox, but then until very, very recently, even the Debian project couldn't distribute Firefox because we backported security patches. So now, eventually, after 10 years or so, we finally managed to get to a point where we can still use the mark because what we're doing is of the correct quality. So there is a judgment call in terms of quality. What you want to do is ensure that the quality is there to use the mark. But we can't do that with the current system. So I notice I have not much time left and a case of questions, so I think I'll probably have to leave it as a bit of an open-ended question. But is there a way of creating a policy or a license or something that can allow us to do what we want? I mean, when the GPL first came along, then this was a mad concept that we would use strong trademark law to let anyone do whatever they want with things. Is there a way we can do similar with trademark law? And if so, and how can we do that? And would that, in fact, be a useful thing for other projects? Or is it just a special case for Debian? So I think that's all I've got. So I think we've got time for some questions as well. So anyone? Or we can all take a break early. Yeah. Oh, yeah, so there's a mic over there.
Would a trademark policy for a project like Debian or Firefox prevent the situation that's happened recently where a website like SourceForge distributes copies of that program with added sort of bundled adware and stuff that comes along with it that is not part of the original project? Would somebody like Firefox or Debian be able to use their trademark in order to, I guess, prevent that or change that from happening? Is that somewhere where trademark is useful?
I'll refer you first to this fourth point here. I am not a lawyer. What I imagine a lawyer may well say is like, that's a very interesting question. We take Visa, MasterCard, checks. I think you might do something to be able to do with brand dilution there. If they are bundling something with Debian, and they make it clear they are doing that, then there isn't necessarily a trademark problem. I mean, it's something that should be frowned upon, but if it's a factual state of what they're distributing is Debian, that's fine. It's when you modify it in somehow. But yes, trademark law could be used to prevent that. But then, what is the difference between distributing Debian on the desktop with a little purple monkey that springs up and says hi and then sends all your data to Amazon, and Debian on the server with a couple of extra kernel packages so it can actually talk to your custom disk firmware image? I mean, they're both functionality. And then does it matter? So one of the key things that free software is founded on is the right of people you don't like to use it. And there's lots of arguments about, oh, well, we should restrict it to non-commercial, or we can say anyone in defense or nuclear industry or anyone who votes for Donald Trump can't use my software or whatever. But the important point is that everyone can. Should you be able to use things to essentially have people you disagree with not be allowed to use your software? I think it's more powerful that everyone can actually use that and everyone can use your marks in a way that maintains that quality than to try and restrict it.
So would that mean the answer to the question of the purple ad monkey versus the kernel patches being that the purple monkey hurts your reputation?
So the question was, for the stream, I think the question was, could the answer be around reputation? So purple ad monkey would hurt your reputation, kernel patch wouldn't. Yes. The key thing that what we can do around making sure that these work well is around this thing about the naked licensing, which I mentioned before. It's the use of this mark and ensuring adequate control exists around not only the use of it, but the quality of the product that's produced as well. That's the bit that needs to be automated or codified somehow, and that's really tricky because that's a subjective field. And so I certainly don't think we'll be able to completely automate all of this, but having a standard framework that people can use to make it easier. Essentially, if Amazon want to come along and use Debian and say, look, we put Debian on here, but they've got a kernel patch and they've got a couple of other bits, it's a scratch and sniff test. So you go, yeah, it's Debian. Everyone knows it's Debian. It looks like Debian. It smells like Debian. They should be allowed to call it Debian. And it's good for the Debian project as well. I mean, there's thousands of huge deployments of Debian out there, but no one really knows it's Debian because it has to hide behind this terrible trademark law in some circumstances, which is, to be fair, improving in some areas, but not in others. So it's something we want to do, that we can ensure that quality. It could be to do with reputation, but also around quality to make sure that that happens as well. Anyone else? Nope. Fantastic. Well, I did manage to leave it a little bit earlier then, so you all do get a break. So apologies for it being quite so short, but that's what you get when you have to write something in at 2 a.m. very quickly. So, okay. So we've got a booth outside, so if you've got any questions, come and see me. And yeah, so thanks very much for coming along. Sorry I wasn't able to talk about Lumio, which I think is something in New Zealand. You can probably tell I'm not from New Zealand.
Oh, we can't tell.
No? Oh, yeah. So when I come to America, then I think the last time I was here, everyone said, oh, have a good flight back to Australia. It's just like, oh, yeah. If I do go to Australia, I've definitely gone to the wrong place, but hey, that's all fine. So anyway, so thanks very much, and thanks for coming.